Abigail. Have
you forgotten my name? Hi, everybody. That's why I gotta write everything down, because as soon as I get up here and I see you guys, I'm like, everything's gone. That was in my head. Yeah, I also feel weird on Wednesdays because I say hi to you when I'm behind the piano, and then I come up here and I say hi to you. But you've already been seeing me for a long time, so hi again. I'm so glad you guys are here. You're having a good week, Hannah? Yeah? An okay week at least? Okay. I'm glad it's not a bad week. Okay. All right. So tonight I want to talk about just something that I've been thinking about for the past week. I don't know if you guys have ever done something where you make a lesson for every week, but sometimes it's really difficult to decide what to talk about. So just so you guys know, most of what I say up here is just things that I've been thinking about all week that I needed to hear. So, maybe you guys need to hear it too. But there was a song that came out this past week. It's called Never Lost. Have you guys heard it? It's from Elevation. It came out last Friday, so it's brand new. We heard it when we were at Inside Elevation. Got a sneak peek. But it just came out last Friday, so it's a really great song. So I'm gonna... Actually, the title that I titled this is some lyrics from here, and it says, "You are still showing up at the tomb of every Lazarus." So that's the title of my little, what do I call it? Message, I guess? Sounds too formal to me to call it a message. But I want to talk about what it feels like when nothing is happening that you thought would happen in your life. When it feels like you're getting lost, or you're forgotten. Whenever I wrote this down, I thought of Lilo and Stitch. When he says, "I'm lost." Like the ugly duckling. That's what I thought of when I wrote this down. So I just want to talk about that feeling, because I think we can all relate to that feeling sometimes of things just don't seem like they're going quite right. Something's a little bit off. You don't feel like you should be here. You feel kind of lost, right? So I want to look at a familiar story, and it's the story of Lazarus. How many of you have heard the story of Lazarus, or know who Lazarus is? So we've got some newbies to the story of Lazarus. That's great. I was hoping so you guys wouldn't be bored when I read this to you. Everybody else has heard it a million times. So you guys are going to be excited, I hope. Okay, so we're going to read John 11:33 through 44. And it's kind of smack dab in the middle of the story of Lazarus, but I didn't want to read to you guys like 50 verses. So anyway, when Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. "Where have you put him?" he asked them. They told him, "Lord, come and see." Then Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, "See how much he loved him." But some said, "This man healed the blind. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. "Roll the stone aside," Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested. "Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible." Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe?" So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, "Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it aloud for the sake of all these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me." Amen. Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, and his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him go." Okay, so those of you who have heard this story before, you know what this is about. But for those of you that haven't, Lazarus was Jesus' friend. Lazarus and his two sisters, Mary and Martha, they were Jesus' friends. So Lazarus gets sick, and Mary and Martha send for Jesus. They say, "Hey, Lazarus is sick. We need you to come heal him or he's going to die." And Jesus goes, but he gets there too late. Lazarus is already dead. So that's where our story picks up. Jesus walks up, and he sees people mourning and crying, and he asks them where Lazarus is, and they tell him, and Lazarus is dead, and he's already been in the tomb for a few days. So for those of us that have heard this story, we've heard it, we've read it, we've watched the videos of it, we've colored the pictures of Lazarus coming out of the tomb with his wraps on him. At least I did. But we still haven't put this passage into effect in our lives. And so this is what I want to talk about. I'm just going to talk about myself for a little bit. I told you this was what I needed to ruminate on this week, to meditate on this week. So I'm going to talk about myself. There are so many things that I wanted to do in life, that I want out of life. How about you guys? So many things? Especially you guys that are teenagers. You guys have so many options, you know? I'm sure there's so many things you want to do. Me, I'm 22. I'm going to be 23 soon. And I think I've never been as scared of life as I have been in my 20s. And it's really just because when you're a teenager, you're like, oh, I have all this time and I have all these choices. And then it feels like when you get older and you're in college and I'm about to be out of college and I'm like, now I've got to start making decisions, right? Maybe it's just because I'm me and literally everything scares me. Anything that inconveniences me or surprises me, it feels like the end of the world sometimes. But I feel like there's so much weight on my shoulders about life. I don't know if you guys feel this way. Maybe those of you who are already in high school or middle school or whatever, maybe you guys feel that way. Maybe you guys that are older, maybe that feeling never really goes away. But I feel like there are things that I've wished for in my life or I thought would happen or would have happened already that I've seen die. Dreams that I've had or ideas that I've had that I've seen die and I locked them away in a tomb. So Mary and Martha sent for Jesus when they knew their brother was sick. They did everything they could to help him. And the Bible doesn't really go into detail about what they did, but he was their brother, so I can guarantee you they did everything they could to help him before he died. And they knew that Jesus was the only hope for their brother, so they sent for Jesus. And they did everything right. They did everything right, and Lazarus still died. They still had to see their brother die and put in a tomb, and to them, that was the end. That's the end, right? We don't expect if someone dies that they're going to get up and walk around after, right? We don't expect that in our lives. To them, that was the end. And so many times, I think we've seen things that we thought would happen in our lives or things that we thought we would be die. Much like with the disciples, if you guys remember, maybe a couple weeks ago we talked about this. Thomas and Peter. When we talked about Thomas and Peter, do you guys remember that? Death often looks like the end. When Jesus died on the cross, that's when the disciples got scared, right? That's when they were hiding in that room and Thomas went to go get food. Remember we talked about this story? When Jesus died on the cross, they thought, well, this is the end. They're going to come after us now. That has to be the end. He's dead. When things begin to look too big for us to accomplish, we have to start acting in faith. And this is the hard part because even if you're the most faithful person in the entire world, faith is not easy. And faith is scary. And it's scary to step out in faith. It doesn't matter how long you've been a Christian or how new you are to Christianity, because I feel like maybe sometimes we're even bolder when we're just becoming Christians, right? But even then, it's scary. It's scary to not know what's next. It's scary to keep going when you can't see what's next. When you can't see what decision to make, or you can't see a way out of your situation. It's scary. It's hard to argue with what you see and experience firsthand, right? It's hard to argue with yourself about that. Mary and Martha saw their brother die. They saw him die, right? They're probably the ones that wrapped him in grave clothes and put him in a tomb. They saw these things happen. They knew he was dead. They knew he was dead, and they knew Jesus was too late to save him. They knew these things. They saw these things with their own eyes. They lived them. But here's the thing. And here's the thing that's so hard to remember. God is never too late, even when we know he is.
Amen.
That's the key. When we know there's no way this is going to happen, there's no way I could do this, God is never too late. Even when we can't understand why something would happen, or even when we barely believe it anymore, even when we have that sliver of a dream that we're hanging on to for the last 20 years, and we barely believe it's going to happen, God's never too late. I always find this part really interesting, that when Jesus gets to the tomb, he cries. I always thought that was interesting because it's comforting to me that Jesus cried at the tomb, first of all. Maybe because I also cry all the time. So knowing that Jesus cried, that's kind of comforting. But Jesus cried at the death of his friend. And that kind of confirms to me that in this story, it's okay to be upset when things die in your life, or when you feel like things aren't going right, or when you feel like you're lost, or when you feel afraid. It's okay to be upset at those things. Because Jesus, this is Jesus we're talking about, he knew without a doubt that God was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. When I said before, you can be the most faithful person in the world and make this so hard, I think I could categorize Jesus as the most faithful person who ever lived. And he cried at his friend's tomb. He was sad that his friend had died, even though he knew that God could do anything and that God would do anything, right? He was still sad in this human situation. It's okay to be upset when things die, and when our dreams don't come true, and when people don't get better. But we can't ever forget that there's a bigger and better plan for our lives than we could ever imagine.
Amen.
Because sometimes things come back to life. This is why I'm kind of saying dry bones tonight, but dry bones have life breathed back into them, even when we've seen them die. Even when we've watched them die and we've put them in the tomb ourselves, we put them away ourselves, sometimes they come back to life. And even when we know it's too late, sometimes they come back to life. We think we know a lot more than God sometimes, right?
That's right.
At least, maybe we don't say that, but we act like it. We think God can't possibly care about my situation, so I'll keep it to myself, as if he doesn't already know. I do that all the time. I can get really cynical about things sometimes, and it's hard to believe that anything good can happen when it seems like all you see is bad. I mean, you can look on social media especially. Social media is so loaded with all this stuff, about all the bad that's happening in the world, and sometimes it's hard to believe that there's anything good out there. But if this story about Lazarus could teach us anything, it's that it's not over when we say so, it's over when God says so. Lazarus was dead. He was dead. We would say, this is over. You were too late. But God didn't say that. God sent Jesus there at the exact right time, because Jesus came at a time where people were crowded around Lazarus' tomb. And Jesus was able to show them who he was and who God was. There's always a purpose for everything that happens in our lives, even if we can't see it. And I don't know if anyone needs to hear this. Maybe it's just for me. But just because you feel like it's over, it's not over. No matter who told you it was, or maybe something didn't happen the way you thought it should, or when it would, or there's a promise and a purpose on each and every one of your lives. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, it doesn't matter. That's why I titled this, He is Still Showing Up at the Tomb of Every Lazarus. At everything that's died and everything we've buried and dismissed, He's still showing up. He's still showing up. So, what I want to tell you guys, and I don't know. This is what I needed to hear at this point in my life, this point in the semester, which was really difficult. Keep going. Keep praying. Keep living. Because those things that you've prayed for, or those things that you feel like you want to do, or that person you want to be, they're not dead. At least they won't stay dead. As long as God is still showing up, we still have hope. And I can tell you that He's still showing up.
Amen.
At the tomb of everything that you've put in there, that you say, this will never happen, you roll that stone over it in your mind and you say, I'm not even going to think about that anymore because it's never going to happen. It's too late for me, or I'm not the kind of person that can do that, or I'm not good enough. It's not too late, and those things aren't dead. And even if you've seen them die in your life, they're not going to stay dead. Keep your focus. Another thing I've said the past couple of weeks. Keep your focus on God. I think the first week I talked about that, I said, we focus on other people instead of focusing on God. And then we focus on our problems instead of focusing on God. So maybe I should say, instead of focusing on what you're not, focus on who God is.
Amen. That's good stuff.
Because He's going to do greater than you can imagine. But I don't know. That's all I have for you guys tonight, but I just was feeling, I don't know, this week has been a long week with lots of homework and lots of stress, and I needed to hear that. Even if it was me writing it down, I needed to hear that, I needed to read that. And I felt like you guys might too. So, all I want to tell you is, don't give up on those things that you want to do, or don't give up on who you think God's called you to be. Because, you know what? Maybe it's not exactly what you think. Maybe it's not going to happen exactly the way you think, but it's going to be better. Just keep your focus and keep going. Okay? Okay? Hannah?